This is the Rope and Radio Network, broadcasting from the heart of Oregon, Salem's capital. Welcome, fellow Oregonians, users as well. Whether you're watching on CC Media, Facebook, or YouTube, you're always welcome here. It is May 2021. Memorial Day weekend is almost upon us, and this is the time where we need to stop and reflect and give thanks to those who have served to protect and guard the gates of freedom. I'm very proud of my nephew, Matthew Evans, who is currently in Korea. He is serving in the Army. My nephew, Trenton Evans, was getting ready to graduate from Corvallis, OSU. Congratulations. But it's not just military that we should remember as well. We should also remember Coast Guard, our police department, our firefighters, our National Guard, and of course, Army, Marines, Navy, and Air Force, and also nurses everywhere. And thank you, Harv Castle, a veteran. He's listening in too, so he's quite intrigued by what we're going to be talking about. I'm glad to have you here, Harv. Thank you for joining us as well.
Oh, thank you.
Psychology. It is a science of mind and behavior, conscious and unconscious phenomena, as well as the feeling and thought. It is the academic discipline of immense scope, the mental process. Now, what does this have to do with our topic today? It has a great deal. There are psychological aspects that can stem from one who has had an encounter so terrifying that it can affect their mental being. Now, what could be so terrifying that it could cause someone to have psychological trauma? Good question. Let's take a look at this map of the northern states here. What do all these states have in common? Well, these states have all had eyewitness accounts of a quadruped bipedal creature, canine qualities. They call it the Dogman. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say this has a resemblance to werewolves or lichens. Well, you'd be right. Now, don't change the channel. Stay with me here. Let's go back for just a moment here in history. Anybody remember Marco Polo? Yeah. Famous explorer, deep sea diver. He had a book called the Batuta. Now, he gives an account of an island that is ruled by this canine race, quadruped bipedal. Hounds, human-like characteristics. Strange things that they did, like they worshiped the ox. The men were like dogs. They had no coverings. They populate like beasts. They eat men. And he noted them as a cruel generation. Now, this is a story that came from him. Is it something he saw? Anyway, I thought it'd be interesting just referencing it. And I'm not so sure everybody's heard of this one before. Is there any credibility to it? Well, to this very day, people are seeing this humanoid canine. Very powerful, very large, terrifying. Enough for you to lose your bodily functions when seeing it. Enough to cause trauma in someone's life. Just the mention of it. Now, some of the earlier accounts of Dogman go all the way back hundreds of years ago. All the way back to the Cheyenne tribe. However, some of the most noteworthy accounts began in 1987. Someone had actually created a legendary song about it. The Beast of Bray Road, about 1961. A night watchman encountered some sort of dogman-like creature. Now, it's true that this gentleman who came up with this song, he does not believe that these dogmen are real. But others who've been tracking them, hunting them, researching them, know better. The Beast of Bray Road was said to be 7 feet to 10 feet. Ran on 2 feet as well. Now, the most recent sightings of the Dogman happened in 2019. I want to say August. The other time, I believe, was in 2013. So these are recent sightings, much like Sasquatch sightings or other creatures being reported. Is it a mistaken identity for a direwolf, which was reported to be possibly the case by one Peggy Callahan from Wisconsin? She is a wolf expert biologist. She is a skeptic. However, the idea fascinates her, as it does with many people. But everybody tries to look for a logical explanation to the unknown. Then again, this is what this zoology is all about. Cryptozoology. The study of the unknown to science. The hidden. Which we try to expose as much as we can. My guest today is just one of a few that I know of that spends most of their time trying to just study. It's not a matter of believing anymore. It's a matter of knowing, because they know that it's real. They've seen it. He has seen it. It's about to get intense. But it's a subject that is very necessary, especially if you're a huntsman, a woodsman, and you venture out many times. You need to be safe when you go out. Please welcome my guest to the show today, Lance Hightower of Cryptid Brothers Investigations. Welcome, Lance.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah. And I know, and if I messed up on the time zone, I greatly apologize.
No.
No? Okay. Fantastic. Now, I was first introduced to you by a gal who said that I should really listen in and hear all about what you guys have been doing. And it's been about a few years now. And finally, when I went to go work with CC Media, they decided to start doing shows on investigations and cryptozoology. Mm-hmm. So that's when I'm like, okay, as soon as I get more established, I've got to have Lance on this show. And here you are. So this is.
I appreciate that. It's hard to get time with doing the investigation. I think a lot of people find that out too. You know, you have busy lives with family, and work continues, of course, what a person does for a living, and then the investigation. So if you had it in the perfect world, we just investigate all the time, but we do it when we can.
Yeah. And I've listened on so many shows that you've done. They're wonderfully done. But I think what separates you from the crowd is how well you take care of the eyewitnesses. There is what I believe is a psychological part, an authoritative part as well, that goes hand in hand. Because when someone comes out and tells you what they've seen, then we have people who step in as well. I don't usually dive into conspiracy theories, but I've got to say, I do believe there's something going on behind the scenes, that these people know these things are out there, but we can't get on with our lives and continue on our daily routine if we know about it. So I think
absolutely
they're kind of swept under the rug, aren't they?
They are. There's quite a few shows aside from ours out there, as you well know, and it was just something that my brothers, when we started our show in 2017. It was something actually that we wanted to do, just kind of therapy for ourselves, because, you know, we were quite privileged to have at least commonality, being brothers, that we could share these experiences we had, and we thought we would just share and have the show. But it ended up being a bit more than that. It actually became therapy, all right, but it became therapy for other people. And it's just one of those things where it can have, after doing now, I would say, close to about 1,500 interviews, that there is a psychological aspect, and it is very much, I think, overlooked in the fact that a person's behavior or how they experience a first-time encounter, regardless of what kind of cryptid it is, because there's more out there than just what we know as Bigfoot or Sasquatch, as well as this Dogman creature, in our opinion. And that if a person doesn't get a chance to fully share, to fully release, get everything off their shoulders, it can develop into some suppressed uh, emotions that can have a huge
Absolutely.
impact at a psychological level that can bleed in or transition into issues at work, issues in relationships, and they really don't even know it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the frog in cold water. Eventually, as the water warms up, it boils and doesn't even know it.
Hmm.
So that's what we were finding out over time, and so this is why we're not one and done when it comes to our investigation. Our interview, we like to follow up with them. How are you doing? Because it's very, very important. Just like many of these associations people have, these addiction where they have to keep going, very much is the analogy of when you do an interview with someone, you really need to follow up with them because just talk therapy is huge. It's
Yeah.
massively huge.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I think you guys do so well. Very few people I've seen that actually reach back out. They usually just listen to an account and then move on. But you guys do it really well, and I'm really glad that you do, because there is all these elements that go into it, and someone just needs someone to listen to them. Now, this
That's
individual
right.
needs someone to just have an ear, pull up a seat, and just like, hey, I've got to get this out. Please be willing to listen to me and not ridicule me for it either, because so many people have had these accounts of doesn't matter what. There's a lot of these things out there.
That's right. And, a first time eyewitness will go through various stages. Their mind is racing a million miles an hour. And it's, you really just have to break it down on a fundamental psychological aspect. So when they see this, their mind's racing. What am I looking at? Is this a guy in a suit? This can't be the guy in a suit. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. How would he know where I'm at?
Right.
And it's not moving the way a guy should, or a man, or a human. So when they fully process, I'm looking at a creature that I've never seen before, and they go through this terror. If it was a terrifying encounter, sometimes it's not, it's of afar. And sometimes it takes them off guard so much that fright or that fear is really not set in yet.
Yeah.
So when they see this, they go through various stages of, who am I going to tell? Well, no crime was committed. I really can't tell a police officer. They're going to laugh at me, especially I know Officer Bob, and there's no way I can let him know. I can't really tell my preacher or my pastor. And so there's a small circle that sometimes people just tell.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't mind telling a little bit more. The circle grows a little bit, but not much. So, even though we've done quite a few interviews, and there's other shows that's done numerous hundreds of thousands of interviews,
Yeah.
I still think that is just tipping the iceberg. I believe that, in my opinion, thousands of people all across the US, and really for that matter across the planet, but just in the US alone, we believe that there are thousands of sightings in a day. And some of these people, just because of how old they are, what they do for a living, regionally, kind of where they live,
Yeah.
they don't know about these shows, and they don't know to talk to someone. So, yeah, a lot of these people need just to kind of share. So when you listen, I've learned to be as open minded as I can. Who am I to call someone a liar? I wasn't there. So to remain, as we all get older, sometimes our mind becomes closed. Sometimes as you become more educated, I think in general, people become more closed minded when actually it should be the reverse.
Yeah.
And you're made a student of life rather than thinking you're a master of everything. And I think that after doing these interviews, I've just realized you need to be open-minded, non-judgmental. And when you break the ice initially and they realize this guy's okay, I feel
Mhm.
I can really talk to him. By calming their mind down, they're going to also realize they can recall more details.
Yep.
And because if someone's scared, it's like a kid. When children outside and they get scared of something, they come in the house, they just say, big, hairy, fast. They just hit the high points, the colorful words, the adjective, But
Yeah.
as they calm down, you just say, calm down, tell me what happened in your own words, take a deep breath, and they go, okay, I was standing by the gate and I was looking to the west, and then you get all these details out. And adults are really no different. And you've just got to, and I found, which is really interesting, the more often that you keep in contact with these individuals,
Mm-hmm.
you'll actually bring out more details.
I've
Now,
noticed that.
some people would say, well, Lance, they're just making something up and it's getting more colorful as they go. And actually that's not true. When you do a lot of when you read on the psychology of someone in shock, or at various levels of anxiety or stress, or even at a higher level of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that they do hit just the main points at first, but then they can go, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that when this happened and this also occurred.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's why another aspect is so important to follow up with that person if they will allow you to,
Sure,
they will allow
sure.
you to, and most will.
Did you major in psychology, Lance?
Well, I took a lot of courses in psychology. My background is in it's chiropractic medicine. I was going into medical school, and I decided that wasn't a route that I wanted to go. And so I went to chiropractic school. So there was a lot of psychology and learning about pain,
Mm-hmm.
A person's pain tolerance and levels. So you take a lot of these courses, but I have done a lot of reading on my own since we started really getting into these investigations, and how the person will profusely thank you just for conversing with them.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the process of writing a book about that,
Oh,
about
excellent.
the psychology of when someone sees this, because it's just a small, I always tell people, you have to remember that it was a scary encounter. We all are fascinated, as I am too.
Yeah.
But these are real people with real lives that saw this creature, just like it would be if it were you.
Yeah.
So it can affect their life, especially if they're home by themselves. Do they live somewhere very remote in an area they don't really have a lot of neighbors, and they really don't know about these shows? So it can play a huge deal on the
Agreed.
psychological aspect. So really, my background, aside from just my chiropractic medicine degree, is really just self-involvement, a lot of reading, and just researching a lot of how a person goes through different levels of emotions and psychological, how the brain really operates when we're in fear or trauma.
Yeah, that's good. I like hearing that. It's fantastic. And a book coming. That's even better.
Yes.
This is kind of the things you have to spend time in. And a lot of people wonder, oh, wait, when they talk to me, they're like, you're not a paleontologist. Well, I never professed to be. Okay. But that doesn't mean you can't have individuals who are paleontologists who can feed you more and more information. And it makes you want to grow and learn so you can better equip yourself and know how to talk to your eyewitnesses as well.
Absolutely.
That's very important.
Absolutely. You don't, in my opinion, you get an opportunity to meet all kinds of people in various backgrounds. And I'm a big proponent of being a student for life.
Yeah.
I'm very privileged. I've got so many people, such as yourself. We can always pick someone's brain.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean, now we have the internet. There's so much information at the tip of your fingertips that you can study. And really, it comes down just how much time you spend in it. We've heard various number of hours, but if you spend 5,000 hours, 10,000 hours at something, you're probably going to be very astute at whatever that information or subject matter is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lance, I know my audience is dying to know how you got started and what made you get involved in studying cryptids. I mean, I personally know that it was your brother that had an experience, and then you followed through because you had an experience as well.
Yes. So we all grew up, my brothers, I have three brothers. One of which is really not, he's too busy doing other things. So a lot of people don't realize there's actually one more brother, and he lives in Texas, but he's not too interested in what we do, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And mainly he's really not had an experience, and experiences, many of your listeners that have had experiences, that's usually what gets them involved. It goes from fright, and then it goes later into another level of obsession.
Yes.
And that's what really occurred with my brother Lane. It actually took him, what a lot of people don't realize is when they hear, he was our first show that we had in January 2017. And we were just rookies at it. I didn't even have the proper, I didn't know Zoom existed. I didn't know any of these platforms really existed. Sure. All I knew is that I taught myself how to get on YouTube, and my phone was broken. and I had a $40 speaker, Bluetooth speaker, and I had a digital recorder, and that's how we started our first dozen shows.
Sure, absolutely.
But I had an experience at 10 years old when we lived outside of a town called Braggs, Oklahoma, and it was actually in the evening, real pretty country. We lived in the sandhills, and I was out putting straw in the garden around the strawberries, and I knew I had to get it done before my father came home, otherwise I was going to get in trouble. So the garden butts up against a tree line where it got really thick, and I was putting the straw down, and as many folks you've heard many times, is I stopped doing it because all of a sudden everything just got deadly quiet.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why, but I just kind of stood up. I just stopped in the middle of my work and I looked around and I'm like, this is strange. I'm by myself and I'm about 10, and I started looking around, and then something told me just squat down and look in the trees. So I squatted down, which was under the canopies, and I looked down into the trees and I saw this figure that was upright. I could clearly see that there was a head. It came to a conical or a cone-shaped head. Yep. It had shoulders, and I could see the arms, and I could see the space between the body and the inside of the forearm, and I could see that it hung quite low. It didn't sway. I couldn't smell anything. It didn't make a sound. It just was standing there, and I knew it wasn't any type of figment of my imagination. I was peering off into the darkness, but there was enough light that it's silhouetted. I could tell the silhouette. And distance, it was probably about 25 yards. Okay. And I just knew whatever that was, I had to get out of there. My instincts was telling me, you need to leave. So I just backed up all the way to the road where my bicycle was down, and then I pedaled home. Of course, I told my parents, and they were like, yeah, it was a bear, which, that's what parents do sometimes. And within that same week, where my bedroom was at, my bunk, I was on the top bunk. My other brother was on the bottom. And in our house, we had large windows, and it was just sheer curtains. My mom she wasn't tall enough to put the curtains all the way to the top of the window frame, so it was down a little bit lower. But there was growling just immediately outside that window. And there was no way I was going to look out that window, because I knew in my head I was going to see something that was going to have an everlasting imprint on my mind, and I didn't want that. At least I had that knowing. And it wasn't a growl like a bear. I told my father the next day, but it scared me so bad. I was shaking the bed, and my other brother got up and said, "What are you doing?" But that was kind of my experience there, and I just kind of blocked it out of my head. Uh-huh. So I really didn't see a face or anything like that, but I did see the silhouette. Then fast forward to about 2003, my brother Lane, him and a friend, they were down in a river bottom area. It's well known for partying. This was outside of our hometown, west of Watonga, Oklahoma. And they actually saw a Bigfoot. It came up the creek and stood behind them and swaying, I'm going to say about 65 feet behind them. Okay. And my brother was hanging out the window. This is the first time he had an encounter. And he actually had a gun pointing on it. And all of a sudden, after about 30 seconds of swaying, it just kind of stood there swaying back and forth. No sound, no smell, nothing. It started taking these huge leaps to the truck, and they started the truck, fishtailed out of there. All their equipment and fishing gear was just thrown out of the truck. And as they come around this corner, dirt road, the guy hit the brakes really hard. And while my brother was hanging out the window, he could see the reflection of the taillights off the face. And he said it was reaching out with its hand, trying to getting close to the tailgate. And he saw a large brow ridge with deep set dark eyes. He said that the hair, prior to it chasing them, he could see like the moon was out, and it was like a silver gray, and it had a sheen to it, like there was oil on it or something. And it would chase them for a while. And they fishtailed down this road until they got to the highway. And my brother wanted to go back, and the other guy said, "You're crazy. I don't want to go back. I'll never go back." So that was my brother's experience. And we had some other experiences deer hunting down in southeast Oklahoma. numerous times in one place where we used to camp, and we don't camp there anymore because it's in an area that is a private lumber company, and they just take out a swath of timber,
Yeah.
uh, and then that's it, no more. So, but we were having, I think we were down there 5 years in a row in the fall, and every time we went, we had on one occasion we've had tree crashes, numerous tree crashes in one night. We've had whistling around the campfire, and it's not just whistling. It was a very loud, crisp type of whistle that
Yeah.
it'd be hard for a human to reproduce. You just know that it wasn't, when it's 2 a.m. and you have a camp full of men with firearms, you're probably not going to go in and bother them and start whistling. So you just kind of use common sense. But we've had tarps lifted up on our tent, our tent cover flaps opened up in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
which was quite alarming. But we've had things like that over the years. So after my brother's experience, though, that really kind of led me, I've heard some of these shows, and I really think we could. It's just, I created the show basically for us to talk about things. And then
Yeah.
it just kind of led into other people. And that's kind of how the show started. And I'm all self-taught. I didn't know how to do YouTube. I didn't know how to really navigate as well as I do now. And I just spent lots of time on the computer
Mhm.
and learning how to edit shows and things like that. So, you can always be improved, but that's kind of what started things.
Well, that's great. Yeah, you'd be amazed how you get started that way. It's we just
Yeah.
pick up one little thing, like maybe get a recorder going, a microphone, and that's how we start. But something like this just really pushes us in the right direction. The whistling sound, I am familiar with those sounds because people would tell me about them. And there was an area near Ramona Falls in Oregon where I was at that location, and then a week later, the whistling sound was heard. Somebody actually recorded it. Fantastic stuff. So, yeah, that's amazing. And I always love hearing how people get started because it actually gives me a perspective from them. So fantastic. That's excellent. Something I want to go in here now. A lot of people study Sasquatch. A lot of people like to talk about Bigfoot, and that's great. For me, there's so many Bigfoot researchers in Oregon. I don't want to say it's the epicenter because some people actually believe that Alabama maybe, or maybe Ohio, some of the other states. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them in those states for sure.
Absolutely. For me, the most intriguing that I've been hearing from you is the Dogman. Now, some people, they're like, what? If you're folks, if you're new to this, if you've never heard of the Dogman, we have the right person in front of us. There's only a few people I know of who have been studying this cryptid, and Lance is one of them. Okay. I think there's a lot.
Go ahead.
There's a lot here that he's going to go through. And some of these accounts are quite chilling, quite terrifying. But it's important. I believe it's important for my fellow Oregonians to know these things so that you take precautions when you're in the woods, when you go camping, things like that. You can't just take things for granted. You have to be prepared. All right. Now, you may be deciding back and forth, okay, what I believe here. But you've been watching me for a while now. So we're going to let this gentleman give you a full rundown on this creature and let him provide his feedback to you, what he thinks it may be, some of the accounts, and what we can come to a conclusion on. But first of all, let's go into those accounts that are, quite terrifying in a sense.
Yeah, and I'm glad you preempted that with just being safe. Whether a person that's listening right now it's never had an encounter, that's actually wonderful. But I've never did or have done an interview in which it was ever a nice encounter with the Dogman creature. It's always, these people are not only terrified, but they always use the word sinister, evil. It just felt like an evil presence when they saw it. They couldn't. That's just the vibe that they got. That even if a person's never had an encounter with this particular creature or any creatures, you really need to be prepared when you go out into the woods.
Absolutely.
And that's one thing I really try to harp on is the safety of investigation. If people want to go investigate, fantastic. Be prepared for the unexpected. And when you go in the woods, take more than just your camera. And then my feeling is if you want to have a Bigfoot encounter, and I hesitate in saying that, stutter a little bit, because you've got to be careful of what you might encounter. So when we take firearms, it's not to hunt anything. I just know that as a human being, I'm not as fast as these creatures are. I'm not as strong. I'm not as keen in the woods, even though I grew up hunting all my life. We're
Yeah.
still not, you can take the best Navy SEAL and sniper, and they're still nowhere close to what these creatures, how capable they are in their natural
Absolutely.
element.
Yeah.
So don't just take a walking stick. Take something to protect you, because really what's out there that you might encounter is a pack of rogue dogs, feral hogs, a mountain lion. And so those indigenous type of animals you may come across first. So at least please think about your situation and at least protect yourself, because when you need something and you don't have it, that's a bad situation to be in.
Yes.
I would rather
Absolutely.
have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So um, this creature it brings up a lot of questions. And I know there was some really good work done by Dr. Melba Ketchum, geneticist. And my brother Laren did some work. We call him Bill. He did some work on this to try and break everything down. I think it was one of our shows, YouTube shows. We had, it was part 2. There was 2 parts to it. And it took a lot of just broke everything down plainly. And she actually knew her stuff quite well. She did it correctly. And when it came to the Dogman, she actually had some genetic testing, and there was a part of it that she said was canine, but the other part was really kind of left gray.
Okay.
And to this day, we still don't know where this creature came from, how old it is, really. But if you go back in a lot of the native cultures in the U.S., there's actually talk about these wolves or werewolf-like creatures. And to put it plainly, one of the team members that we have, Wiley Dave, who is a professional coyote caller or game caller, and he makes these calls. He had one come up that he just described. He said, it's a werewolf. That's what it is. It's a giant canine that's black. His was black with amber or golden eyes. And, he is one of the best shots I've ever seen next to my brother Lane. And the guy just has eagle eyes, and he knows ballistics and firearms extremely well. He shot for Remington when they were developing certain ammo charges.
Mhm.
And he just said that he didn't have enough gun. He had a 223 with him. And when you're hunting predators, you can only have 1 in the chamber and about 4 in the magazine. And he switched out to a 20 round. And he said, I was scared. For the first time in 38 years, I was scared when I saw this thing, because it's not normal for our dogs, our pets at the house, to walk around on 2 legs.
No.
And this creature was walking around on 2 legs as normal as it was coming in on 4. And how it left, it never did see him. It got within about 400 yards, but he had a scope on it. And the military grade scope, you can get height and width very well. And he doped his scope twice, and it came in at about 7.5 feet tall standing, and about 4 to 4.5 feet shoulder, deltoid edge to deltoid edge, about 4.5 feet wide.
Yeah.
And that's quite large, and about 550 to 600 pounds.
Wow.
It's quite large, and there's some people out there that definitely, especially in Oklahoma, that have seen these creatures numerous times, just because the area is very conducive to continual food sources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We always say water sources is kind of the highway for these creatures, as well as other types of indigenous wildlife. But these creatures are no different. They have to eat, they have to drink, they have to sleep. And so there are certain areas where people will continually see these creatures. And they come in there's different colors of them. They're different sizes.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, it's basically a wolf that's like on steroids. It is almost like a prehistoric size. We're talking anywhere from 350 pounds, and I've interviewed people that as big as 1,200 pounds, the size of a horse. And I interviewed one gentleman east of Tulsa who was a retired police canine handler. So he knows canines really well. He knows his breeds.
Perfect.
And he looked out into a field where there were some wild horses that this person was raising, wild stallions. and he saw this creature running, chasing one of the stallions and gaining ground fast.
Jeez.
And he said it was just about a little bit shorter, but as far as the length, it was the same length as the horse, and it was about the size of a full-grown pony. And this is a canine. So if you think of a full-grown pony, it's not quite the size of a quarter horse. That's still a large horse.
Yeah.
And he said, I could tell as it went over this ridge, it was gathering itself up to make an attack. But I didn't see it, Lance. That's all I saw.
Wow.
But he knows it was a canine. He just said, that's the largest thing I've ever seen in my life. And this was right in the daytime. And there's so many I could go into as far as encounter stories. But, this creature is that I'm aware of, it's in every state in the U.S., except I haven't had any from Hawaii. But Canada, Mexico, I've had calls from Mexico. They have their own version, and it's the same type of creature. Some of these creatures, and it's probably a bad analogy, but the best way I can look at it, I'm not saying it's human. I'm just saying that humans, we have different sizes, different color hair, different skin, different eye color. It's really no different there. It's just like our breeds of dogs. We have different dogs that are different sizes. These creatures, some are more frightening than others in the morphology or facial features.
Yeah.
Different hair colors, different eye colors. I would even go so far as probably there's different demeanors as far as their character. There was one guy, this kind of a young man, I interviewed him out in Texas, and he kind of put 2 and 2 together about in his hometown where he lives that there was he noticed a lot of posters of animals. Find my cat. I can't find my cat. I've got a reward. I can't find my dog. And so there was a lot of these posters of missing pets. And he would pay attention in the evening. He just noticed that there was a lot of dogs barking, and it was around the town at a certain time. And it was always this common thread of barking. And he said, I bet you there's a big cat chasing these things and getting these pets. So he told a buddy of his, I think if I was one of these creatures, I would hide over in this particular part of town. So they developed this plan, and he was down in this bottom area. And ironically, it was outside of a golf course. And he told his buddy on the high ground, he says, when I tell you I want you to throw rocks down in the bottom, just don't hit me in the head. And he had a fight. So he was in the bottom. He had an AK with a full drum. And he didn't know what he was going to see. He was expecting large cat, a big mountain lion, something. He told his buddy, throw the rocks down. And he was just looking around, and he saw something coming up about 15 to 20 yards in front of him, something just kind of shaking off, coming out of a thicket. And the grass was about 2 to 3 foot tall. So this thing just kind of sleeked out, and it kind of looked like it was floating out. So he's like, what is that? So he's expecting, again, a big cat.
Yeah.
So he moved to this clearing. As it was going to come, it was going to be right there. He was going to meet it. And as he got in this clearing, he waited. It came out and was just in full view. It was only about 15 yards from him, and it was one of these Dogman creatures.
Yeah.
It looked right at him, and he was looking at it eye to eye. He told me he was about 5'9", and on all fours, this creature was eye to eye with him. And he's looking at this, thinking, as he's told me, he said, I don't know what I'm looking at. This is not a cat. It's nothing of the feline family. I'm looking at a dog, a wolf. I don't know what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked at him with these huge, he said the eyes were the size. Whoop. We still there?
We are.
Okay. Let me get this off here.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Do you have something you were looking to show us, or?
There we go. No. It just sometimes my computer has a glitch.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So he said the eyes were about the size of tennis balls.
Okay.
And this was full view. This was in the daytime. This was early afternoon. He said it was black hair. Its ears were pointed like a Doberman Pinscher. They were straight up, and its eyes were in the front. And the eyes were so large, he said it could probably look behind him almost. And the old common, when it comes to animals, eyes in the front hunt, eyes to the side hide. And so he said the eyes were just huge. And it had this look, this intelligent look about it. He said, I could tell it was thinking. And I said, if it could talk, what do you think it was saying about the time you were pointing your firearm? He said, it was looking at me thinking, you got me. You got me. Go ahead, pull the trigger. And he just didn't know. And it just was calm, but it was just had this huge hump over like this mane that came off of it. And it had a huge bushy tail. And he really couldn't take a look. He didn't really see the paws too much because it was in this grass.
Mm-hmm.
And then he lowered his firearm down because it didn't seem aggressive or was going to, have this aggressive posture. And it just turned, it backed up and then it turned and went back. And he said, in retrospect, it was frightening, but I didn't know what I was looking at, Lance. I was looking at something that I've never seen and I didn't know it existed. And he said, I think this creature was the one getting those pets. And what's really intriguing is that where he lives, there's a lot of cattle yards.
Okay.
And his brother works out there. And when a cow dies, because there's thousands of them, they call it a carcass. And they'll do a carcass number check every day. And they'll say, hey, we've got 15 carcasses on lot such and such, such and such, such and such, such and such. Please go collect the carcasses. And they go out there and they'll say, you were wrong on the carcass check. We only had 5. You said 15. And that was happening quite often, but no one ever connected the dots that anything might be taking that.
Yeah.
So we think this creature, and by the way, when I say creature, usually when you see one, I tell people there's usually another around.
Okay.
They're usually not by themselves. These creatures know how to hunt. They're very, very intelligent. They know how to flank.
Okay.
They know how to open. Unfortunately, it's scary to think about this, but they know how to twist knobs. I've got some patients or some clients that have had their lights off outside, little bulb. And they're like, I just put a brand new bulb in that. And they saw this creature roughly at the same time around the house. And they would go outside in the daytime and all they had to do was just screw the bulb back in. It came on.
Okay. Wow.
So we're just kind of postulating they know how to unscrew a light bulb. They know how to open some doors. I had one client, or rather an eyewitness, said that he'd been seeing these creatures and he was out. I think he was in Michigan. That's another hotbed for these creatures.
It is. Yep. Yeah.
And he was out there with loggers, and he had his food in his front of his truck, and he left the door unlocked, and they were out there doing some logging. He came back, and they were really very remote. It was just him and a few guys, and they came back, and his door was open. His food was all over the place. And he just said, can these creatures open doors, Lance? Because, I saw them at a distance. They were pretty frightening. And we don't stay till after 5 o'clock because it starts getting dark. He goes, but can they open doors? I said, well, based on a lot of the interviews we've done, yes, they can open windows, doors, false locks on barn doors, a lot of things. And we still don't know to what degree or level of intelligence they still possess.
Yeah.
But usually when you see one, you'll see another.
Yeah. It's interesting. You said that they've been seen all over the U.S. We can't really account for Hawaii, of course, but my thought from what I've been hearing was I actually thought they were mostly to the upper states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. It turns out that's okay. That clarifies it for me because they're all over. And
they are. They're far south is way south in Texas.
Okay.
And there's in the Louisiana, Central Florida. I haven't heard any further than that in Florida, but Southern California. Okay. So yes, they're practically all over. Oregon has a few. I've only had a few encounters there. Okay. The people that call me in, but it seems like the central part of the U.S.
Yeah.
From Minnesota all the way down to Texas. And even though there's been encounters all across the U.S., that seems to be a hot spot into that Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all the way down into Kansas and all the way down into Texas area. But although there's still a lot of these in Kentucky, Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, but that seems to just in general the hotbed of activity.
You mentioned the different color eyes, and that's quite intriguing because I remember one of your shows, the gentleman said that it had blue eyes.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that. Yes, I was surprising to me too. But I look at this just like breeds of dog. We don't. That's always like an interesting thing, and I really never have a great answer when it comes to people asking me, "Where do you think these creatures came from?" And I guess it depends on the type of creature in many cases, but it can get into some debate. But for me, it's quite simple.
Yeah.
I guess, or this is how I categorize it. This is how Lance categorizes it.
Okay.
I believe that some of these creatures, or a portion of these creatures, have been here a very, very long time. I believe in a biblical aspect to these creatures' presence. I believe they've been here a long time. I believe there's variances within that species of cryptid. And now when we say cryptid, really we might as well use the same word in the analogy creature. And when I use the word creature, I'm referring to something that is not a indigenous animal that is in that particular region. So in Oklahoma, where I live, there's a lot of indigenous wildlife that's normal. White-tailed deer. We've got raccoons and possum. Occasionally we have black bear. We have mountain lion. The typical wildlife within your region or state.
Yeah.
So a creature, and there's a lot more out there. My brother Lane, he says this all the time. He said, if we only knew the various types of creatures that are truly out there, a lot of people would never go in the woods.
I agree.
And now exactly how long they've been here, I don't know. How they've evaded our eyesight, and it's just, they're extremely fast. They're very elusive. So I think in general, people ask me, do I trust them? And I said, well, these are creatures that you just don't want to throw a collar on them and call them Fifi. They're just not that way. They're extremely intelligent, and that's not going to happen. But they are very real. They are as real as you and I talking right now. And I believe a biblical aspect that goes back into Genesis, whether it's the Nephilim or the Gibor, I believe that these beasts have been around. They've been able to elude us for years, but there are certain cultures that, whether we think it was lore or wives' tales or just scary campfire stories, I believe there's always a truth element to all of those stories. And so
I agree with you. I agree with you because throughout history, there seems to be depictions of certain kinds of creatures through legends, through wall paintings. They're just there, and we're wondering, okay, this is just made up stuff. No, I believe there's a deeper part here. There's a reason why people are depicting them in their art, maybe because they're seeing them. And I know that some of these are pretty radical, aside from the Dogman, like, for instance, the Jersey Devil, which I've talked about in the past, which I believe may be some sort of a chimera effect or an experimentation of some sort. We can go on and on about what we potentially think. But folks, you have to understand too, you're watching me, you understand that I have a biblical aspect to how I present these things. Okay. Lance feels the same way. I don't know if we're completely on the same page, but I do believe there's an answer here. Okay. About where they all came from. And these things that we're seeing in our world that are maybe potentially genetically altering these creatures or animals for a certain preference or a certain reasoning. It's hard to wrap our minds behind that or get around it because we just don't understand it. But they are there, and they're a part of our world, and people are still seeing them. It's quite terrifying to think that these things could be all over, but more and more people are seeing them, and they're coming out. Now, what I want to touch on something here just for a moment before I go into a little bit more lore. Bipedal locomotion. Now, this is usually something that is referenced in evolution, that an animal can stand upright and walk. Okay. Other scholars have said that is something that you can train. Any mammal can do it if it is trained or motivated. I have to, okay, you know where I'm coming from. I'm not an evolutionist. I'm a creationist. Okay, folks. So, can an animal be trained to walk on two legs? Well, I've seen dogs do it. Okay. For a short amount of time. Can it do it for a lengthy amount of time? Like, for instance, this creature, a Dogman, because it literally stands up, it grabs onto trees. It will use its ability to run. Then it goes from bipedal to quadruped very quickly. And it makes it seem like it's nothing. Okay. So I'm not so sure that this bipedal locomotion plays an effect in that. I guess it just really depends on what you believe. What's your personal thoughts on that, Lance? Have you heard of that expression before?
I have. I haven't really thought about it a lot, but then again, I have, with my background in chiropractic, structure and function.
Mhm.
One has to dictate the other. If you don't have the proper structure, you don't have the proper function, and vice versa. So I've thought about that a lot. And, you can train canines, as many people have and do, to walk bipedally, but it's not the normal structure of the hip joint, the ball and socket, to do that. And it's not something that the dog can do for any length period of time
Agree.
because the structure does not dictate how that hip socket is joined. Whereas, and so even if you train a dog, it's still going to seem it's going to walk very similar, bounce
Yeah.
on two legs, or it's going to have this alternating gait, all right, but it'll look kind of funny, like a penguin, so to speak. There's not this nice, smooth, fluid motion that you see humans do. So the thing with me that, when I ask a person, they saw this creature walking bipedally, and I say, did it hop, or was it side to side, kind of walking like it's kind of stiff, like the Tin Man? And they said, no, Lance, this was walking with its leg up like we do. It was walking very fluid, like it was walking bipedally as easy and smoothly as it was on all fours.
Yeah.
So that tells me that the structure of that hip, that ball and socket of the hip joint, is such that it has for a wider range of motion, greater range of motion. There's no impeding of that socket.
Yeah.
So I find that, so now we're talking in a genetic alteration. And so I would love to study the internal components of this creature, of course,
Mhm.
but I think that, which leads into another thing. Has anyone ever killed these creatures or studied them? And I'm going to say, yes. I cannot prove, but then again, you cannot disprove. I believe that people have accidentally hit these creatures, have inadvertently or intentionally shot these creatures, not knowing what they were,
Yeah.
because it was so frightening and it just happened so quick and it was a reflex action. And they just left the creature. And I think that and you actually already touched on this, I believe that when that happens, I believe they don't know who to call, so they call all these entities and law enforcement. And ultimately,
Yeah.
there's this agency, let's just say, and they will extract that, and we'll never know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so people will look at me like, Lance, come on now. And I'm like, I'm telling you, there is this agency, and in my personal opinion, these people live in every state. They could be your neighbors. But when they get up in the morning and have their coffee, like we all do, their job is monitoring all social media. Their job is to review police scanners. They are looking to basically subdue or keep quiet what it is Farmer John shot out east of town. And so they'll be one of the first on the scene if they can. But I personally believe they don't have a handle on these creatures, because I just don't think these creatures have a tracking device or anything like that. So I think they're just trying to put out the fires as much as they can, but to their advantage, they have social media. Everybody's letting everybody know what they're doing every second of every day.
Yeah.
And they scan the scanners, and they'll listen to YouTube shows as well. We've had ours listened to quite a few times.
Mm.
And this is why when I do an interview now, we're very strict about no names. We're very strict about no specific locations. If it's on personal property, if it's on state property, that's different.
Okay.
But we don't give out the occupation of the person, and that calms the person down. Getting back to the psych aspect, if they know you're trying to protect their identity, uh, and some people want their voice changed too, that they can fully divulge what it is they saw, what they think, the context of everything. And so they can just kind of let their hair down, so to speak, and I allow them to speak freely.
Yeah.
So it's a scary creature. We're still trying to understand it. We have I've seen them. Wiley has seen them,
Okay.
but it's not been up close with us. They're just hunting predators in general. If you're within a sight of them, if they see you, usually they'll bolt, and they'll be hundreds of yards out there. If they smell you and they don't see you, they'll still bolt and they'll take off. So these creatures are very hard. You've got to use wind to your favor, which is always when you're hunting predators, or big game. Wind is a huge issue. And then the next thing is you don't want to be seen. But we do this. We're not out to hunt these creatures. I'm trying to get clear, like 4K footage.
Yeah.
They're so fast, and to have a camera going all the time, it's just virtually impossible.
I agree.
It's just a lot. It's kind of like getting a good print.
Yeah.
You've got to have. It's so hard in Oklahoma. Everything is so rocky and so grassy that to get the beautiful, like the Dr. Meldrum print, it's just so hard to get that beautiful cast. But that's what sometimes you get lucky. And that's kind of what we're hoping for when we go out and we call with Wiley Dave's Call, is that we bring in coyotes like crazy, but you never know when it's going to bring in that creature. And what you don't know when you use one of those calls is, are you going to get one or are you going to get 7? So you've got to watch your back. You've got to watch your 6. And that's why usually we never go by yourself with that call.
Yeah.
It's a special call that he made that has a couple frequencies in there. You can't hear the frequencies, but all you hear is one sound. But he was real reluctant, actually, in making me one. He just said, "You got to promise me you never go by yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And so we go as a team when we use that call, or when we go out to, particularly we go to Western Oklahoma. That's where he had his encounter.
Okay.
But I could talk forever on this one because it's just a elusive, terrifying looking werewolf-like creature. And
I know that's hard to say too, because a lot of people are like, did you just say werewolf?
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
And I only use that word because it is such a common word that we started using it in the search engine for our show. That's one of the search engine main terms that people were typing in, because and sometimes I don't even like the word dog man because it implies like half man, half dog.
Sure.
But I think the man aspect of this creature in describing it comes from the ability of walking biped. It's intellect, which we still don't quite understand. We just know it's really smart. And some of the features and physicality features of it, when people describe that it had deltoids like a bodybuilder.
Right.
It has deltoids like a man. It had biceps like a man. It even had digits. When Wiley saw his, it wasn't like a huge dog paw that has the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th digit with a metatarsal pad.
Mm-hmm.
And usually the 1st is the dew claw on a dog. It's up here somewhere. This creature literally had digits, fingers with claws about an inch long. So that's what was quite terrifying, is that it had features that we're all familiar with: fingers, legs. It had a thigh. Even though it had dog hocks with like the reverse knee, it still had thighs like a bodybuilder. So I think that man in dog man, that's where it kind of comes from. But
I think so too.
I don't know who first came up with that term, but when we use it, that's what most people go, oh, I know what you're talking about. But werewolf, it was so common of a search term. We used it in with our show in the YouTube, and that's what drew people in, because that's all they could think of. It looked like a werewolf, so that's what they would type in: walking werewolf.
That's what I think of
Wisconsin.
Now I know that in the past I chatted with a woman from Wisconsin, Peggy Callahan, who's a wolf expert. Now she's not a believer in the Dogman, that it is real. Mostly when you talk to those who are experts in animals like avian type, or when you're talking about maybe flying pterosaurs still being alive, they're going to dismiss it. You talk to paleontologists, they're going to dismiss it. But she had been following werewolves since she was very young. She loves the idea. She's like, I believe that what they're seeing is a dire wolf, if you've heard of that. Mm-hmm. But the problem, again, it's like saying I've seen a sea serpent and it was a manatee, or it's probably a manatee. Suppress the. I could go on about this, but I'm not going to. I'm just
because people are using the thing that's different, and I was the same way at first. Yeah, and that's, I think it's easy to rationalize too. You want to. I've had people tell me, Lance, your background's science. How do you believe in this stuff? It's not a matter of belief. That's right. The wrong term. Yeah. It's a matter of knowing, because I've seen. Beliefs can change, either solidify your belief, or it can be debated and you can change your belief.
Sure.
And what we've seen with my own eyes and with my brothers and what Wiley, we've seen, we know they exist. What we're trying to, so there's no debate with us. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to understand their behaviors, their tendencies and characteristics a little bit more, so we can inform others and inform ourselves, but also get better picture footage, because it's just, again, it's kind of like finding a good print. It's a lot of luck at the right time, the right place, the right camera, the right light, the right everything. And I believe people have got footage of these creatures. It's just it's too grainy. It's the lighting's wrong, or it's not enough. But even then, I have to understand, convincing people is a very hard thing to do. Yes. And this is what I told my father. We're not in the business of convincing people. Unfortunately, people are going to have to have their own encounter. And that's a scary thing to say, but before they know that they saw something that they can't explain, and it was terrifying. But we're in the business of helping people that have seen understand more, like us, because we're still learning. And it's just one of those things that the creatures, these Dogman creatures, comes in all shapes and sizes. I mean, you've got to be small before you get big. So maybe they're seeing something of an adolescent before it's full grown. I believe there may be different intelligent levels because of their experiences. But, just by their design, they look like an apex predator, the size they are. So they're a meat eater. But even coyotes, for instance, I've been out coyote hunting, and I've seen coyotes eat persimmons out here in Oklahoma. It's the equivalent of like an apricot that grows wild. And I've seen them on their hind feet. I've seen coyotes on their hind feet eating persimmons off a branch.
Yeah.
Now, they're not walking around by no means, but they'll have a diet of some level of vegetation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know it's quite impossible for the logical, especially a scientific mind, to go, this doesn't make sense. This is not rational thinking. And I understand that, but these creatures exist. And so we're just trying to, that's kind of where my book that I'm writing is geared toward. It's geared toward the person that has seen something and they want answers, and they want to know why are they obsessed now about it, and how come they told this one person and they received threats back. They don't understand what kind of creatures are out there. What are they capable of? Why did I see it? Yeah. So there's a lot of these, and so I just saw a gap there, and so that's kind of where the premise of my book is kind of moving in that direction.
Yeah, and I want to encourage everybody to, when you get a chance, check out everything that Lance has done on YouTube. You can go and you can find Cryptid Brothers Investigations, and he's also got a 1-800 number to call if you ever see something and you need someone to talk to, because sometimes, like we were talking about, you can be traumatized by this. it can really affect your life. So Lance is a great person to go to if that ever comes your way. So when you get a chance, check out that. Also check out his website. He's got a website too. That's where I found him. I went back. That's how I was able to get a hold of him and see if he was able to come on the show. So I encourage everybody to check that out. Few things real quick here, Lance. You've had some cases I really I enjoyed listening to them, but they are very, very disturbing. For instance, the gentleman who was attacked in Ohio by the Sasquatch broke his ribs, thrown out of the boat, something like that. And I know it's going to be a long story we can go into, but I'll tell everybody, just go check that out. We've had people contact me and say that they were really interested in that case, but you can't give out a lot of details on that one because he wanted to stay anonymous. And then he also had government officials, I think, froze his assets.
They did. I still stay in contact with him to this day.
Good.
It was his cousin that had a broken rib, which lacerated his lung. So the lung was punctured.
Yeah.
And he had a little bit of a concussion. But that story was one that I kind of put us on the map there. And I was still new. That was the 24th show I did. And I haven't gone back and fixed it. So there was no intent. But the second half, when you watch the first half of that show, then it goes blank the same length of time as the first half. and everybody was saying, what happened? And there was no intent. What I did when I was rendering the show, I messed it up.
That's easy to do. It really is.
And so that was just my fault. And I've just kind of left it. I need to go back and fix that. But there was no intent or purpose of that. That was just my fault. But that show, very briefly, two cousins were fishing, broad daylight, like it is right now. They were out in a reservoir in Ohio. They were very close cousins. They were bass fishing around this island. Now, this island was quite large, and it was in central Ohio. And one cousin thought the other cousin was throwing rocks. Come to find out, he said, there's someone up there behind that tree. They pulled the boat up. The other cousin was reluctant in doing it, which was the one I interviewed. And he threw rocks behind a tree. A Bigfoot stepped out. He took that act as aggression. So in just that quick, that Bigfoot was on them and had hit that cousin that threw the rocks, knocked him in the water about 15 feet, broken ribs, punctured lung. The gentleman, the cousin that I interviewed, and you know something. Here's another key feature, people. When you listen to someone and they're telling you something happened and they're opening up to you, anytime someone divulges a bathroom habit to you that normally is not in a discussion, and they say they wet themselves, that is not something that people just readily share unless they truly were frightened and just in a huge state of fear. And so that's what happened to him. And so they were able to get off the island. When they got back to the shore, he was calling everybody he knew, sheriff, police. I mean, he had a slew of people there. And the story develops into a police officer gave him our toll-free number. He said, call these guys. So that was us. I was able to interview him 3 days after this occurred. I told him, this is what's probably going to follow next. And then it was almost like I wrote how things were playing out. And I said, if you go back there, if you go back to that landing, it's going to be closed. There's military going to be blocking off that road to that boat landing.
Yeah.
So he went back and there was military blocking off, and there was a Huey helicopter at the same time coming in, double blade. And he said, Lance, I don't understand what's going on. And I explained to him what was going on in the story. And what followed is that, long story short here, his bank account was frozen. His wife didn't understand. And I told him, I said, I understand you're in shock. You're trying to feed everybody around you that you love and care about an elephant with just a spoon and say, swallow. I said, you can tell me because I know it happened. But to anyone else, you're going to have to feed them a little bit. But he was in so much shock, he just wanted to verbal vomit everything. And so he lost his marriage. He lost his house. The bank, when it finally opened up his account, he had lost everything. And that's a long story there.
Yeah.
What's really crazy is I told him, I said, let's just don't talk for a while. intentionally. And I wanted to talk to him, but I was concerned for him
Yeah.
that they were listening in our conversation. And so finally, I text him about 2 years later. And now we talk more often, but that first encounter after 2 years, we did another interview, life after the Ohio
Sure.
Bigfoot attack, and his account got closed one more time. Now, people could say, well, Lance, that's just coincidence. Maybe he was tax evasion. Maybe he was this. Maybe he was that. Sure, it's possible. But what is the coincidence having a second time within the week that I spoke to him about how he's feeling? Has there been anyone follow him? Has he been out to that reservoir? Just not complicated questions, just I'm trying to get a feel of how he's doing and if he had any questions for me. And I can't answer everything, but I'm pretty good about knowing what might happen next.
Yeah.
And so I try to keep people, this is what you need to do, and this is what you absolutely don't need to do. And so his account got closed again. And so he called me back. He said, Lance, I can't believe this. It got closed again. And what is going on? I said, it's the same thing that happened the first time. So let's do this. Let's talk, but let's not talk about that subject.
Yeah.
And everything has been fine. So we kind of speak in code. What I've done is I've used snail mail. I sent him a written code that we can talk, but it's very generically talking about the weather. But the word weather means something else. So that's kind of how we've had to do it. It seems kind of nutty, like crazy.
No, not at all.
I know what it sounds like, but if people only knew sometimes what we knew, because when I hear these encounters, I go to work like everybody else. I go shopping, groceries, we pay bills, but there is so much more. It really reminds me, honestly, the best movie I can think of. It almost reminds me of The Matrix with Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
If you really want to know how the world exists, take this pill. If you want to remain in the world and not know it exists, take this pill. And it's almost kind of the analogy of that is the best I can describe it.
You see how far the rabbit hole goes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. Amazing. Well, I know I've taken a lot of your time here, but it has been fantastic. This is exactly what people need to hear. And this is why I wanted you on the show. One last thing here, Lance, though. The Dogman. You think it's a skinwalker? Something to do with the Cheyenne tribes of having this? I've talked to Native Americans about these things, and a lot of them believe in it. They believe that these people can transform. But of course, nobody's ever witnessed a human being transforming in the process. It's just you see a creature that resembles humanoid features. Do you think that's a good possibility?
I'm open to anything. I think that the Native Americans of this country, they're, a lot of what they saw and a lot of what they knew was more than just beliefs. Their spirituality and their medicines and their goes extremely strong, extremely deep. And I think some of us hearing these stories just kind of pushes it off. But I do believe there is that possibility. If we all remain open-minded here, I've never personally seen that either.
Yeah.
But the skinwalker, I did a segment on that one time, and it's possible. I'll put it that way. It's very possible that this Dogman creature and the skinwalker could be in some form or fashion, some interrelationship.
Yeah.
Because again, every time I can't think of one interview that I've done with a person that's had an encounter that it was ever a pleasant encounter, even if it was not aggressive or anything. They just saw it at a relatively close, or either close up or at a moderate distance. It's always been they got a feeling of evil, of something sinister, and even so far as more than a handful of encounters that it gave a sinister-like grin.
Uh-huh.
Now, how many domesticated dogs? We know that when dogs are happy, they can have like a smile. We've seen that. When they're happy, they're wagging their tail.
Hangs out.
And so we can see that. But for a person, an eyewitness to say, it looked over its shoulder at me, Lance, and it gave this sinister, like, grin, like, you're lucky you're in your car and not outside of your car.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're mine, kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And that right there is terrifying.
It is.
And that's happened more than on several occasions from these eyewitnesses that when they encounter these creatures. So that's a good question, though, on the skinwalker. I'm not sure, but I'm open-minded to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Lance, it has been absolutely fantastic having you on the show. This has been very knowledgeable, learning from you. And I think that everything you've done and how you've helped people has been a blessing. So everything you do, everything you say, keep up the great work. God bless all the work you do.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being on your show. And if anyone has any questions, what I'd like to do for your listeners, and I can send you the link, is we have, I think, about 70 shows on YouTube, but we also have about 110 shows on our private membership. And I would like to give maybe about 40 shows to anyone that listens to your show. I'll just send all the links to you and you can give to them.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I like that. That's great. Good way to collaborate, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, then I hope you can enjoy your Sunday, and I hope you got nice weather down there where you are. And I know it's sunny here in Oregon, but I know that the sightings are on the rise, I think, at this time of the year.
Yes, and that's what I just got through doing a show for my members, is that I just said the 2 times of year, and most people investigate kind of know this. I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't have sightings all year round, but the 2 times of year that tends to have most activity pick up, not only for this Dogman creature, but for Bigfoot, is going to be in the spring and the fall. And we believe in the fall because there is some level of knowledge that the Bigfoot will find mates in the fall.
Yeah.
And then for the creatures of these Dogman, there might be, this is a time where they're out. Of course, we've got everything is blooming, and we've got blueberries and different types of fruits and things. But for the Dogman creature, it might be where that's the time they mate. We just don't know enough to be absolute on that statement. But that's tend to be those 2 times of season, spring and fall, tends to, everything kind of goes up a little bit. The other thing I'll say with that is that these Dogman creatures tend to have, you see them most typically around weather events.
Okay. Interesting.
Whether it's a windstorm, a hailstorm, a rainstorm, a snowstorm, some type of weather event people see prior to, during, or after, which is very, very interesting.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I've gone over things like this in the past regarding the cryptid I like to follow. I think there's weather patterns that bring out some of these things. Mm-hmm. Very fascinating. We'll touch more about that in the future. And I do hope I can reach out to you more often, sir.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yeah. Thank you again for your time, and enjoy your Sunday. You've been a blessing.
You too. All right. Thank you. Blessings to you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
I want to bring up a case that he actually had heard about from an eyewitness. We didn't get a chance to talk about this one, but I'm going to go over it just briefly. There was a truck driver that was going through a lonely country road who had a quite terrifying run-in with the Dogman. As a matter of fact, he was outside the truck working on it. I think he was changing the tire. And then he proceeded to get into his vehicle. Driving about 25 to 30 miles per hour, he noticed something in the mirror on the passenger side, keeping pace with his truck. Now, his truck is anywhere from about 9 feet to 10 feet in height, sitting upwards to about probably 7 feet. This canine quadruped bipedal creature was keeping pace with him at 25 to 30 miles an hour on 2 legs as it got closer and closer. Finally reached the passenger side, looked into the semi. That's where he had a chance to pull out his gun. He did fire, and it did bring the creature down. This made him stop, gather his composure. There were some people also following him, but they weren't as close, though. We believe it to be a Dogman. it eventually wandered off into the woods, but from the two eyewitnesses as well, behind the semi-truck, they said they thought they saw two bears, one bear carrying off another. Well, we know that wasn't the case. They were quite startled by it too, because they were trying to search their mind for the most logical creature it could have been. That's why they said two bears. So it turns out there were two dogmen, not just one, at the scene of the crime. But one was shot. If these creatures are skinwalkers, then chances are that this canine potentially transformed afterwards back to its human state. I don't know. This is probably my top 4 all-stars in this field. The Dogman. It interests me far more than any Sasquatch. I guess I'm just a sucker for the more terrifying ones that are out there. What do you think the Dogman is, folks? Is it real? Is it made up? Is it a hoax? Or is it possibly something truly out there? And you should be on your guard the next time you go hunting, or any time you're out there in the woods alone. Don't go anywhere you wouldn't go without your firearm. That's a fact. Thank you so much for joining me. Before I go, seek the truth. And God bless every one of you during this Memorial Day month. I'll see you next time.